A new survey finds the vast majority of Canadians believe that society has become more fractured. The study from Deloitte and the Angus Reid Institute found that 96% of people are concerned about issues such as access to basic needs and well-being, but less than half are confident that significant progress will be made in the next decade. The majority of Canadians point to the media and social platforms, as well as government, politicians, and policymakers as the largest contributors to division in Canada. 93% of respondents recognize unity is essential to addressing the issues we face. Now, for more on this story, we're joined live by Mike Robitaille, partner at Deloitte Canada's Purpose Group. Mike, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'd love to start off with those who don't know. What is social cohesion and why does it matter?
Sure. And first of all, thanks so much for having me. And thanks for the interest in this topic. It's not a sort of typical news topic, but it's of critical importance. If you want to achieve progress, you actually need to organize people in pursuit of that progress. And so social fragmentation and lack of cohesion is essentially groups pushing and pulling in various different directions and the inability to move in a singular direction.
So what's the worst case scenario here if we're already seeing that Canadians are fractured? Where could that lead us as a society?
So call it the negative sides of it is increased conflict, increased division within a society, but mostly it's the lack of progress, the lack of ability to tackle the things like, as you pointed out, 96% of Canadians are concerned about access to basics, food and shelter. How do we actually get there together? Climate change, as an example, right? It's not as though there aren't a lot of science-based facts and lots of things we couldn't be doing as individuals, but how do we actually mobilize as a unit, as a country, as a people to address these topics? If you have a fragmented society, it's very difficult to organize people in a common direction.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about that fragmentation and how we got there, because these polls' findings show that majority of people seem to agree on the issues plaguing Canadians, agree who's to blame for those issues, and agree that cohesion and working together is the solution. So if all those points match up for most Canadians, why do we still have this divide in place?
You know, I think there are a number of contributing factors that lead to division. Like, part of it is, if you're in the business of mass persuasion, whether it's advertising or political campaigns, there are very effective ways to mobilize people by pushing instincts of fear or appetites. And when you push those buttons, you end up invariably cleaving the population apart. But an easy option for organizations, whether it's a country or a company, is to actually push a button of human idealism, things that we actually all care about, whether it's taking care of loved ones, a sense of equality, a sense of self-esteem. You can actually push those buttons and they actually unify people in a direction, as opposed to pushing the pretty effective wedge issue politics button. But you can push a unity button and it achieves greater progress still.
So it seems to me that this study shows that people really are opting for the divisive, easier tactic than the cohesion and working together. So looking at these findings, it's not just the media and social media that's to blame, but people seem to be judging policymakers and governments. What advice would you have for them? Do you think these findings could push them to change their policy making in a different direction?
I think it's important that all of us that are in some version of a mass persuasion occupation, or we have that responsibility, is to appreciate the consequences of pushing buttons of instinct or identity instead of pushing that human ideals button. Like, if we don't unite behind these ideals, and they're ideals we can't see, right? You can't actually see a love of family or a love of nature until that behavior gets willed into existence. But if we don't unite behind those ideals we can't see, we'll remain divided by those things that we actually can see.
Let's talk about the hopeful side of this, because as you mentioned, this polling shows that most people agree unity is the answer. Does that point that there is hope, that we can change and become more unified again?
We get behind these organizations all the time, and political leaders all the time, that actually represent those better angels of our nature, that actually represent those ideals we share for a good life, for a better world. Like, when you think about climate change, there's a very large, very successful outdoor apparel company that starts with a love of wild places. And because people galvanize around that, the people who are actually part of that community, they behave in a pro-environmental way. They have a great regard for climate action and the need to behave differently. So there's lots of evidence that when, as an organization, whether it's a company or a country, you actually start with human ideals, great things do happen.
Okay, I like that positive note to end things off with here. Mike Robitaille, partner with Deloitte. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights with our viewers.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Eden.
Thank you.